All right. Thank you for coming out on week one. It's been a crazy week, a crazy week already, but I'm happy to have this opportunity to introduce Erin Espelie. I'm going to start with a land acknowledgement. The University of Oregon is located on Kalapuya Alihi, the traditional indigenous homelands of the Kalapuya people. Following the treaties between 1851 and 1855, the Kalapuya people were dispossessed of their indigenous homeland by the United States government and forcibly removed to the coastal reservation in Western Oregon. Today, descendants are citizens of the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde, the Oregon community of the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians, and they continue to make important contributions to their communities at the University of Oregon and across the land we now refer to as Oregon, as well as around the world. I think in the context of our current moment, these are important acknowledgments. It is the truth. I'm super excited to have Erin Espelie here this afternoon. Erin is an experimental nonfiction filmmaker who co-founded NEST, Nature, Environment, Science, and Technology Studios at the University of Colorado in Boulder in 2017, where she is an associate professor of cinema studies and the department head.
I didn't put that in.
Yeah. Her poetic non-fictional films have been shown at the New York Film Festival, the British Natural History Museum, SFMoMA, Full Frame, Rotterdam's International Film Festival, and more. Her feature-length film, the Lanthanide Series, premiered at CPHDOX in Copenhagen and won the grand prize at Seoul's International New Media Festival in 2015. She has been the chief editor at the Natural History magazine since 2014, and her hybrid writing has appeared in Leonardo, The Brooklyn Rail, TiltWest, and her co-edited book, Deep Horizons, a multisensory archive of ecological effect and prospects, was published by Amherst College Press in 2023. Let me welcome Erin.
Thank you so much, Colin. Thank you all so much for being here on a beautiful afternoon in Oregon. It's a privilege to be here with you. I want to start with this particular species of saprobic crust fungus. The genus species name is Tirana coerulea, but it's also known as blue velvet on a stick, or cobalt crust. And it was first described by Jean-Baptiste Lamarck in 1779. And it feeds on rotting wood, deciduous wood usually, like oak, maple, ash, and its texture can vary quite a bit. It can either be velvety smooth when it's very, very moist, or it could become very brittle when it's dry. And it can also produce an antibiotic that can kill Streptococcus bacteria. So I find it quite alluring. And 3 months ago, when Wendy wrote to me and asked, what is the title of your talk? I was thinking about how to frame our conversation here today. Right at that moment, the filmmaker David Lynch, how many of you all have seen any David Lynch films? A few of you. Director of Mulholland Drive, Eraserhead, Elephant Man, Twin Peaks, The Return, Blue Velvet. He died, and I was thinking a lot about him and his work and his influence, and I will tell you right now that no one has ever told me that my films are like David Lynch films, ever. And yet, I find myself quite drawn to what I think might be some similarities that I will pull out for you here. First of all, we both grew up in Idaho. It's really nice to be back in the Pacific Northwest. We were both shaped by our childhoods in Idaho, which were sylvan in nature. We were creatures of digging in the dirt and the mud, of building nests of long, long grass with our best friends. digging, as I said, poking at caddisflies in the creeks. And David Lynch described his childhood. He said it was building backyard forts, it was blue skies, picket fences, green grass, cherry trees, but on the cherry tree there's this pitch coming out, some black, some yellow, and millions of red ants crawling all over it. I discovered that if one looks a little closer at this beautiful world, there are always red ants underneath. Another similarity, Lynch's dad was a scientist. My dad was too, is. My father was, and my mother was. David Lynch's dad studied ponderosa pines. He worked for the U.S. Forestry Service. Started in Montana, Idaho, and then ultimately got pulled to D.C. where he worked. My dad studied paper wasps. And at a very basic level, Lynch's films and mine are about looking closely, looking for that oozing pitch, and trying to see what might be overlooked by others. This is a still image from one of my films, A Net to Catch the Light, which in part depicts, as you see here, a retinal eye surgery. But it's also about the relationship of blue light in relationship to our circadian rhythms, the way it can affect our cells, and also about our increasing reliance on digital devices when it comes to portraying and representing the natural world. And so this afternoon, I'd like to take you through a couple of the major films that I've made over the years. And I'd like to peel back the bark of a few of them, show you a few excerpts, one full short film, and then I want to focus on my current project, Ideas of Order, which will bring us fully back to the world of bacteria and the realm of blue-green microorganisms. As I said, I'm really happy to be here in Oregon. A big thank you again to Wendy and to Colin for organizing and making this possible. To be among all of the cedar trees and in the hazelnut groves yesterday, it feels quite rich, and that there are many things to peel back and look at. I took this picture with some friends of mine when we were along the Mackenzie River just yesterday morning, and in these few millimeters I count at least 6 species all tucked in conversation with one another. As Colin mentioned, I teach film at the University of Colorado Boulder, but I also work at Natural History magazine, which is based in New York City. It started at the American Museum of Natural History, AMNH, on the edge of Central Park West. How many people have been inside the halls of AMNH? Several of you. So I would walk past the Hall of African Mammals and go up to the 8th floor every day to work at this magazine, which continues to go. And I mention it in part because as we're thinking about complex ecosystems and entanglements and the ways that things connect with other things, I can't disentangle my writing and my role at this magazine, where I'm exposed on a monthly basis. It's 10 issues a year, with thinking about the natural world and the way the natural world is being impacted in profound fashion by anthropogenic change. So that I just need to nestle in there at the beginning here as we're thinking about my work, I think, more broadly. Okay, so let me start with the first film that I made, just as a kind of little entry point here. It's called What Part of the Earth is Inhabited? I shot it all on Super 8 film, and I retraced the steps of Charles Darwin on his HMS voyage, HMS Beagle voyage in the Galapagos, but also along the coast of Chile. And I was thinking here, again, about the way that the natural world has been informed by the presence of Homo sapiens, which of course can't be taken out of that idea. We are of the natural world ourselves. But it became an important component of this film as I was thinking about these guanacos here and the marine iguanas and the blue-footed boobies, all of the different species of that particular region, and the way in which humans were constantly looking at them and searching for them, filming them, photographing them, and that became part of the film, and in turn started to lead me down this path of thinking about evidence, visual evidence, and the way that visual evidence informs how we in turn understand, dissect, take apart the world to better understand it. So the next film I made, Facts Told at Retail After Henry James, was thinking very specifically about evidence. I then kind of moved from there into this conversation with the work of, again, Charles Darwin, but also bringing in the logician, Charles S. Peirce, and Arthur Conan Doyle, where I got the title Valleys of Fear from, to look at, say, this Polistes wasp or this alligator from South Carolina, and thinking about how some of these species, specifically megafauna, initially inform us, but then also moving into the world of the entomological. So the next film I made, I'll just mention, was called Silent Springs, and it was made on the 50th anniversary of the death, or of the publication of Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, which was published in 1962. And I was interested in how little had changed since the publication of that book, and the fact that we were dead in the midst of a 6th mass extinction on planet Earth that she had foretold, and yet for 50 years we had done very little, and we're doing even less. And unlike her focus on the worlds of the entomological and the avian, I was interested in the amphibious. So I was looking at frogs and toads, and specifically the chytrid fungus. So bringing in a little bit of the microbial, which, as many of you probably know, is quite a deadly fungus that prevents amphibians from breathing through their skin and kills them. But there are potentially antibiotics that can help prove some kind of microbial resistance to the chytrid fungus. So as you can see, I'm thinking a lot about non-human animals and the ways in which they are integral to our ways of living. And to be honest, I just like pointing my camera at them and living with them for a little while and looking at them through a lens. So another insect, that's a cankerworm. It rained cankerworms this one spring that I was living in North Carolina. They literally would fall in your hair, and some people were incredibly grossed out by them, but I found them so beautiful and delicate in their little inchworm maneuverings. And I made this film in 2012 in North Carolina, working specifically with female physicists at Duke University who were studying light and the transmission of light and neutrinos as well. So I showed this series of films yesterday. I know a couple of you were there. The True Life Adventure series that appropriates Walt Disney's soundtracks from the True Life Adventure series of the 1940s and 50s, condenses it, manipulates it, creates its own world, but it also has a lot of the entomological. So at this point in my thinking, filmmaking and practice, I was seeing insects as something I wanted to photograph more and to understand them as memento mori, these highly ephemeral beings that are here for such short amounts of time and yet contain whole worlds that I find quite beautiful. They also present a huge amount of diversity, more than almost any other group of animals on the planet in shape and behavior and dimension, not to mention color, highly interesting. Yet, if I'm thinking about it kind of from an ethical perspective, which I hope you'll kind of allow me to take us down this route, they suffer almost no ill consequences of being filmed. You know, I can't be certain if this hummingbird suffered ill consequences from my filming it building a nest and ultimately fledging its 2 nestlings. I tried my best not to, but I was very aware of it. The pill bugs, I don't think knew I was there at all. Okay, and I also just want to mention the idea of materiality. As a filmmaker, it's something I think about quite a lot, whether I'm shooting digitally or on 16mm film or Super 8 film. I mentioned that in this particular work, The Sea Seeks Its Own Level, after Joyce, where I circumnavigated Ireland and was obsessively reading Ulysses and pulling out every reference in Ulysses to water, but thinking about sea level rise, while working with a defunct analog Super 8 camera that had an improper register and the claw wouldn't pull the film through at the proper rate. And so I'd get double images in every frame. So there's little echoes or jumps or bumps. And so the film had a way of kind of talking back to me that digital film does not have. So in thinking about the shifts that are happening as we increasingly digitize our representations of the natural world, I was thinking kind of, okay, well, what are our devices made out of? What am I reliant upon? I'm certainly completely complicit with computer, with my camera lenses. What am I using? Because that too is of the earth, but what part of it? And it became slightly magical. Arthur C. Clarke has an incredible quote. He said that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And that's how it felt for me when I'm looking in a device. If I see people, searching the world through an iPad, I became really interested in that material. So that led me to a particular group of elements. How many of you all have looked at the periodic table in the last 6 months? Anyone? Yes, we have a few chemists in the room with us. They can tell you more. But I know that the lanthanides are pulled out. They're the weird ones at the very bottom with another series there that don't quite fit in the warped world of the flat periodic table. And the lanthanides are also sometimes called the rare earth elements. They're not rare, they're not really earth, they're metals, but they are very hard to disentangle from the elements around them. And the places that they're being mined oftentimes become quite radioactive and toxic sites for working. And it turned out when I was thinking about these elements that a mine in California called the Mountain Pass Mine, which had been closed for many years because there had been a radioactive leak and hundreds of millions of gallons of water, radioactive water, ultimately leaked into the Ivanpah Valley, and so it was shuttered. But that meant that the US was becoming highly reliant on China for the production of rare earths, and that was skewing the price of them. So in 2012, the Mountain Pass Mine reopened. Simultaneously, the US's longest ongoing war in Afghanistan was getting quite heated, and there was an area in Afghanistan that had been identified as being rich in rare earths. So it was quite a moment for thinking about our reliance and interconnectivity on a global scale for these particular elements, which are all necessary for every eyeglass you look through, every lens, every camera, every microphone. Everything that we kind of think of when we think of technology is dependent on these elements. So I made a film in 15 parts, one for each element. And I want to show you a little bit of this. Let me give you a little taste of it here. This is a mirror factory in North Carolina.
In our lives, the days are not all equal, nor are there objects in them. We work to make things into our own image, but we destroy what we force into our own image. All I see of the future is a reflection of us.
Okay, so that was one element, cerium. You didn't get the whole element building up, but cerium is used to polish both eyeglasses and lenses, but also mirrors. Part of the Lanthanide series really does emphasize the screen and what we're getting from the screen, and specifically non-human animals represented through or with a screen. And because I became so interested in what was held there, I ended up filming the whole film in reflection. So in every single shot there's a mirror, or it's directly shot into a mirror, i.e. a defunct iPad as a black mirror. So you can see here is like a little bit of an edge. I was filming the primates at the Denver Zoo, but the way I was filming was into a defunct iPad that was catching the reflection of the world around. I also, because of my deep interest in primates, I was able to get access to a zoo in North Carolina where they were actually working with primates using devices. So let me show you a little clip from that part of the film. This is the sequence of the next element coming up here. And the doubling you see of the image is that I'm shooting all of that in reflection also of a defunct iPad. So all the text gives you that. I also became deeply interested in obsidian as early Black Mirror, clawed glass, watching through the reflection of Black Mirror. And I mentioned that in part because I came to Oregon to look at the obsidian fields, and you are all ripe with obsidian. So if anyone's interested in that, I can talk more about that. But okay, so thinking again about material capture being very important, understanding what the material is that is either filtering what we see, controlling what we see, determining it at many levels. And one of the things that I had really hoped to do for filming the Lanthanide series was go into an iPad factory. I wanted to see Gorilla Glass being made. I wanted to see that world. I even had a friend at Corning who I thought could get me in, but it was just too strict, didn't happen. And I realized that Apple, Steve Jobs, was controlling my world, controlling my vision. And he had gone so far as to patent the word retina, or copyright it, trademark it. It was controlled by Apple. So technically, I was not supposed to call a film retina because retina display had been, and retina had been taken. So I thought, what a better way of thinking about how in total thrall we are to the corporate control of our colors, our images, everything coming through the filter of corporations, and then not even being able to take our language and use our language for this. So I ended up using the Mandarin character-based language for retina, which if you do a kind of translation of the character bases, I got to the title, A Net to Catch the Light. And this is a hand-processed film, so I'm working with both the materiality of hand processing 16mm film, doing the chemistry myself, and putting that in conversation with digital work. Okay, so let me, I touched on this film yesterday. Let me do a little kind of pause here and reset by reminding us of the ant and the ants with a micro-fiction by Lydia Davis. Brief incident in short A, long A, and schwa. Cat, gray, tabby, calm, watches large red ant. Man, wrapped, stands staring at cat and ant. Ant advances along path. Ant halts, baffled. Ant backtracks, fast, straight at cat. Cat, alarmed, backs away. Man, standing, staring, laughs. Ant changes path again. Cat, calm again, watches again. Colin mentioned nest. I will just, in the same way that Natural History Magazine has informed me, I will let you know that the formation of nest at CU Boulder has also been equally important in shaping and thinking about my practice. It really is about bringing artists and scientists in conversation together. Dancers with mathematicians, a sculptor with wildfire scientists, ceramicist with mechanical engineer to pull out volatile organic compounds from the air and do aesthetic air purifiers, and a whole host of other things that has been quite inspiring. A whole series of murals, and I just want to credit the idea of crossing over as being quite generative. And the piece that I want to spend the most time on today will focus on a direct interaction and collaboration that I have had with a biochemist on campus that came out of this work that I've been doing in Nest. But then a couple of other little short films I'll just mention along the way. This is a film called Gathering Moss that I was taking little bits in the same way that medicinal healers used to do, gather the moss and then use that to staunch a wound. And I was thinking about this film in the same fashion, that I could take little bits of things as I moved through the world, bring them together and think of them as potentially healing. This is a red fox that was wounded around the area where I live and would come periodically in its wounded phase, and I got to see it quite close up for about 2 months of its life and my life. Okay, let me show you a short film that brings out the entomological and my interest in that. It's called Tenebrio Molitor, and I made it in 2019. I then made Heart Radical 61, which I think I'm gonna kind of skip over to get us to my current project. And I want to have another little interlude with text where I quote from one of my favorite poets, Lanthanide: "The world is vast and overwhelming. Each moment stands under an enormous vertical and horizontal pressure of information potent with ambiguity, meaningful, unfixed, and certainly incomplete. The open text is one which both acknowledges the vastness of the world and is formally differentiating. It is form that provides an opening." And I think in all of this profusion of films I'm mentioning here and talking to you about, that ultimately is a way of distilling something that I'm getting at and attempting to, is the vastness of the world, the infinite number of ants that are under our watch, or could be. How do we find structure? So one of the ways that has been very helpful to me of late is working with a biochemist who studies cyanobacteria. These are plates upon plates of different species of cyanobacteria, and I was drawn to this particular group of microorganisms for a couple of reasons. One, they are what are responsible for all life as we know it on Earth. They oxygenated the Earth 2.5 billion years ago in the Great Oxygenation Event, the rusting of the Earth, where planetary atmosphere changed because of organisms. And actually, it was pollution on their part. Oxygen is their off-gas product that can actually kill them if it becomes too toxic, or it can become too toxic if there's too much oxygen for cyanobacteria. Yet that profusion of oxygen allowed for evolution on Earth. And I don't know, do we know any other species that are changing atmosphere and potentially committing suicide in the process of that? And then also, they are our perfect climate change organisms, because what they do need is carbon dioxide. So they have the potential to sequester CO2 while giving us more oxygen. And they are quite beautiful organisms. To watch them grow is a privilege, and for me, enters into this whole other visual space. And so I started as an artist in residence in the Cameron Biochemistry Lab in 2019, and by 2021 I had gotten the key to the lab. I could have access to the microscope whenever I wanted to, almost, and just started recording and growing different species and seeing what they did. And the trick was that light is both needed but can be toxic as well to the cells. So finding the balance of getting just enough images of them to document their movement, but not giving them so much light that it kills them. So I also love that idea that the light is both growth and death for these creatures. And what the lab ultimately didn't want to happen was to watch the cells die. And so they would always turn off the cameras when that happened. But my intervention was that I actually wanted to see the cells die. And I found that to be the most beautiful part of the whole process, was when the oxygen built up and swept them off the stage. So in 2022, I had made a series of short films. I made some still images, and I worked with the lab technician, Evan Johnson, to plate all of these Petri dishes in various configurations, and launched an exhibition at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. And we had these light boxes and kept the cells growing for 2 years, replenishing them once. So that was a really incredible project, and at some level I thought, okay, I'm done with cyanobacteria after all of those years. But then another part of me was realizing I still was not finished seeing all of the capability of what could be done. I'll just show those two images on the left there, are the moments that the oxygen bubble, which is that black that black sphere is pushing all the cells off the plate, off the screen. So then I did another project with the bacteria at this drive-in in Center, Colorado, that I called Windbreak, and we projected at large scale the tiny microorganisms, and had a whole installation at the drive-in. So, yeah, they have so much diversity. So for me, again, if we kind of are tracing my trajectory, and as I was thinking about what to show you all today, thinking about, going from the megafauna of the Galapagos to the microorganisms that have become the focus of what will now be my second feature film, I'm calling Ideas of Order, and I hope will be finished in the next month or two, has been quite an interesting journey. I've kind of gone from the very big to the very small. I wanted to end by showing you a little sequence from this larger film project, and I wanted to also address the idea again of the digital versus the analog, the emitted light versus projected light, the CGI image or the AI image versus the non-manipulated kind of indexical direct connection to an organism, and just put that out there as a question of how are our ways of looking informed by color, by scale, by knowledge of the ways in which things have been gathered or created or produced. And my short answer is that there's just so much to see, and we need to be looking in all of these ways, and whenever we can, looking under and looking more closely. I think we're facing so many different planetary warnings, political warnings that are coming at us, that the more visual reminders that we have that complexity goes so far beyond what we can imagine, and that the vastness of that can be quite inspiring, and that we should be looking at every organism, however small, with the greatest attention to their movements, to their contributions, and that we need to think more carefully and considerately about evaluating what we're seeing. So let me show you this last bit. stop there and just say, these are my literal and metaphoric red ants here that I have peeled back for you in homage to David Lynch. Thank you so much. I'd love to take any questions or have conversation. Yes, please.
Thanks for your talk.
Yeah.
I'd be curious with this piece, where you talked a little bit about the sound design. I'm curious about that.
Yeah.
And I'm also curious whether you see these images as they're in this interesting in between state between abstraction and representation. I'm curious how you see them when you're working with these.
Yeah, oh, it's such a good question and highly relevant to the way that I've worked on the piece. It has actually ended up that I have worked with a composer for the first time. Composer / sound mixer. It's someone I'm really comfortable with and able to kind of be weird with and do strange things. So I'm showing you, I showed you obviously just a little fraction of it, and it's peppered with a voiceover throughout. So the moments that we have just pure bacteria in motion are the moments that I feel like the sound design comes forward most prominently. And the big question is, how much will it in a real cinema space where you don't have a bar across the bottom and you're in surround sound, how much will you be cognitively thinking about this is sound designed versus being in the space? And I hope the way that I've layered the piece, you're immersed in it, and it envelops you, and it allows you to see a little bit more clearly rather than distance you from it. This will be a big question, and I'm honestly not sure yet. But yeah, I hope that starts to get to that first part of your question. In terms of representation, I mean, it's so true. Like this idea of how much to make these call out the fact that they're living organisms growing and dying and in this world, rather than looking at them as image, object, art, separate space. I think, and I hope again with the voiceover and the way that I'm kind of leading the viewer through it, you are always reminded that these are organisms, these are colonies, we are a colony, and so it doesn't feel fully abstract, but I recognize that the images can take you there too. So I hope there are also moments of contemplative kind of just immersion in the image. Yeah, and I think that's the thing too about scale that's so strange about this, is like it's so micro, and that yet sometimes it feels like you're looking at a city or you're looking at some cosmopolitan aerial view of the planet. It's Koyaanisqatsi like. Yeah, so hopefully it goes between two and can hold all of that. Yeah, thank you for that question. Any other questions or comments? Yes, please.
Have you ever considered, I noticed that you use a lot of analog to digitalize it. Have you ever considered using analog material and presenting it in an analog way?
I do. I didn't ask actually if you guys could show 16, but for instance, the show that I'm doing in Portland on Saturday night, I assumed that the micro cinema could show 16 millimeter, and I was wrong. They're like, oh, no, we just do digital now. So I do like to show on analog when I can, but it's hard. I was just talking to Colin before, you get a scratched print, is it gonna burn in the gate? Do you have a projectionist that knows what they're doing? There's something beautiful about that it's easily killed, but it's also expensive. So yeah, it's a balance. I like working that way though. I will say that the University of Colorado Boulder has fantastic facilities. Like we can print digital to 16 on site. We have a great dark room. We have amazing scanners and Oxburys, and so I'm lucky enough that my institution supports digital and analog. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you for your presentation. I was fascinated by this dialogue between art and science, and I was wondering, how do you see the role of art in this process? Is it about giving visibility to certain phenomena, or aesthetic dignity, or I don't know?
that is the question I ask myself all the time with Nest. And I think ultimately what I'd like to hope for is that that if scientists and artists can work in combination together, in true collaboration, then methodologies can shift. So often I think artists come to a scientist and they want to be inspired, or they want to, kind of be able to do whatever they want to do by imbibing what the scientist might offer and take the metaphors and go off and do what they want. And so often scientists see artists and they think, oh, someone to visualize my data, someone to publicize my work, someone to be my broader impact person for NSF, someone who, I can tell them what to put out there. But in a perfect collaboration, it's much more dynamic. But that's scary for everybody involved because you don't know what the outcome is, and it's not dictated, and that often results in failure or something that may be unsatisfying. I feel like I've been really lucky in this collaboration that I've had with the biochemist and the Cameron lab, because there were no expectations, or I should say that at some level the expectations were checked off when I did the show at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, and then I felt totally free to do whatever else I wanted, and the lab still wanted me to be there and do whatever I wanted. And I think the most satisfying thing that really has come out of the collaboration is that the lab has published a paper, and I'm a co-author, based on data that they got by letting the cells grow longer and die, that they would never have gotten if I hadn't suggested it. I mean, that's literally all I did to get credit on the paper. I was like, don't turn the cameras off, I want to watch them die. And then in watching them die, the lab was like, oh, we see what's happening with this particular organelle. So that's like for me, that was like the holy grail of collaboration. It's like, oh, the scientists got something out of it for themselves. I got something, unbelievable out of it as well, without having an expectation. So, yeah, I don't know. It's a huge question. I feel like we could have a whole seminar semester on that, but a quarter. You guys are on quarters. But yeah, I'm really intrigued by that. And science art has gotten it's become quite popular, I think. And that's making me want to stay farther away from it, because it feels like it's becoming too facile and people are using it in ways that I'm less interested in. So I don't know, it's cyclical. I think it comes and goes in terms of being in fashion. It often has to do with how much money a lab has as to whether or not they will support an artist. And so other people have traced that science art world, all based on funding. You can look back at IBM in the 70s, and they had enough money to have really crazy video artists like John Whitney, and then they don't. It's back and forth. Other comments or thoughts? Yes?
Yeah, thank you so much. Really wonderful. You mentioned like some other films, like Scotsy and See the David Lynch shows. Some of it reminds me of Chris Barker, Sam Soleil.
Ooh, thank you so much. That's a huge inspiration for Ideas of Order.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yep.
I was wondering other inspirations that potentially involve that.
Oh, so many. Where do I start from? Let's see. I mean, the essay film as a form that Marker was so seminal in launching has seriously influenced me. So other documentarians who've worked in that form, even like Ross McElwee, I don't know if you know his work from Harvard, and Bill Brown. Even someone like, I'm thinking of like the French filmmaker Jacques Rivette, someone who like doesn't necessarily work in a traditional documentary form, but is taking inspiration from improvisational forms. That's interesting to me. I'm pretty non-discriminatory when it comes to film watching. Yeah, I'll see if anybody else pops in my head.
We were talking about brackets yesterday.
Yeah, I wouldn't have cited him, but no, I mean, I will. The whole experimental film community is who I'm having a conversation with, ultimately, and maybe that's also a curatorial conversation as well. It's like thinking about different places and groups of people who are interested. So like light industry in New York is a place where there's a lot of conversation happening there. There's a filmmaker, Ben Russell, who's based in Paris, who is actually going to be in Portland on Friday. If anybody's coming up to Portland, doing something at the Cinema Project there, he's an incredible maker. I guess I do like having conversation with people. So whenever that's possible, I welcome that too. Deborah Stratman in Chicago, she's amazing. Any other questions?
Oh, just another quick one.
Please.
I was really seeing like lots of different levels and feelings, and some of it kept coming as work, and I think that's just partly because we're seeing a world that maybe we're not used to seeing. There's a big about like triggers with insects and things like that. But I didn't initially think myself as having that, but like the last piece too was reminding me of like the sort of the vibes of like Resident Evil, and the red lighting and
Yeah.
the sound design. So I was curious if that was intentional or what your thoughts are.
Yeah, there is something about living in the world of these bacteria that are just growing at this frightening rate and then dying in this horrific, massacre that felt dark to me. And I did feel, going back to the sound design question, like that there needed to be a weight to that and some like kind of undercurrent of being unsettled, something unnerving. There was like using some of those deep tones and the rumbles, just to you get sometimes in the ASMR world and like that feeling of roiling and discomfort. I wouldn't call it eco horror, but just more a sense of where am I, who am I, what's happening here. Yeah. Any other questions?
All right.
Thank you all so much for coming.